Salutations! For today's video, I'm going to be covering something Halo related that I've always been fascinated about. The development of the Halo titles throughout the years has always been an interesting topic for me because I had the chance to experience the beginning of some of my favorite Halo games of all time and see how things have changed throughout the many builds of the game. And one of the more exciting builds for me to explore is the Halo 2 beta. I'm the Vengeful Badum, and for today's video I'm going to be completely analyzing the Halo 2 beta, going over the plethora of differences between this build and the release version of Halo 2. This build in particular is vastly different from the final product, way more so than how the Halo 3 and Reach betas looked and played compared to their respective final builds. Even Halo 5's beta, which took place nearly a year before the game's release, didn't perform this differently. The main menu itself looks nothing like the release version. Many of the tabs do not work in this build and can't be accessed. Surprisingly enough, there's even a tab for saved films, a feature that was supposed to debut in Halo 2, but was held back to be released with Halo 3. Going into the options menu, there are two extra tabs named Playlists and Game Demos, both of which are still inaccessible. According to the description of our playlists, it seemed that Halo 2 was originally going to let you host a cycle of game types within custom games, similar to Halo Custom Edition's dedicated servers. Meanwhile, the Game Demos tab was brought back from the original Xbox version of Halo 1. The customization options for your Spartan and Elite character models are also slightly different. Choosing the colors for your character model and emblem is a bit tedious. You select your colors one by one, and you can't see the changes to your character model unless you exit the character editor. Elites, in particular, are handled quite differently in terms of color customization. The color that is usually supposed to be the secondary palette for your Elite is always a shade of black. Your actual secondary color palette in the beta is Elite Skin, which can look pretty goofy with certain color combinations.
So, how did your date with Jewel go? Girl, you don't even wanna know. Oh my god, tell me. Fucking blind. He threw up on me! He just had to order fried kig yard at an Ungoli restaurant. Who does that? Have you, tried washing it off? It kind of smells disgusting. You don't think I've tried? It won't come off, you bitch! Ow, stomach!
Some of the emblems that are included in the final game don't make an appearance in the beta. However, there are some emblems that show up in the beta but were cut before Halo 2 was released. These include the Legendary Difficulty logo, an Xbox logo, a different version of the Champion emblem, Event Horizon, Sansa being named Hunter in this build due to the cut Headhunter game mode, Biohazard, and Duality. There are only 3 game modes to choose from in the beta: Slayer, Assault, and Capture the Flag. There is also Halo Reach's Headhunter mode in the beta's files, but that can only be accessed through modding. Luckily, we're still able to create our own game type variants for custom games. When editing a custom game mode, the same initial options that are present in the final game can be seen here, with the exception of an additional tab for description text, which doesn't work here and is absent from the final version of Halo 2. In the Match Options tab, there are generally 5 options to choose from. However, in the Halo 2 beta, there are 2 other options in the form of Allow Observers and Allow Join in Progress. Allow Observers would have basically been similar to the Spectator mode seen in Halo 5. There are way less settings for the Player Options section to choose from compared to the final release. In the Vehicle section, the Spectre isn't available in the beta. The Flying Vehicle section would be renamed to simply being called Banshee in the final release due to the Banshee being the only flying vehicle that is usable in multiplayer. Lastly, the anti-personnel turrets would simply be renamed to Large Machine Gun and Large Plasma in the final version. For weapons and other equipment, all of the usable weapons in the game can be selected except for the Brute Plasma Rifle and Sentinel Beam. Navigating the custom game lobby is kinda cumbersome, where you need 2 controllers to actually start a match. Typically, the custom game setup menu only has 4 options, but the beta has 3 extra tabs that a player could potentially switch to. The playlist option cannot be accessed, the Quick Max section will take you back to the custom game lobby will be met with the invalid playlist alert, and the Optimax section shows an empty list that would have been filled with playlist options. There are only 4 maps in the beta: Ivory Tower, Midship, Waterworks, and Zanzibar. Lockout could also be played in the beta as well, but I didn't have access to it when I was playing. Finally, the Quick Options section in the beta is much more barren than the final game, with only 5 selections to customize your game with. Now to the good stuff. We'll be finally jumping into the gameplay itself to see how the Halo 2 beta plays, and holy shit, this poppin'. If you thought the final version of Halo 2 had pretty bad pop-in textures, you haven't seen uncut footage of this beta. You're gonna have to get used to it because you'll be seeing a ton of that in the video. Also, just to warn you, you might as well get used to me saying the word different a lot because that's not getting old anytime soon. The HUD isn't that much different for the exception of the shield bar jutting out from behind the motion tracker. To start off with the weapons, the carbine is in a very unfinished state. A significant part of its textures and lighting effects are unpolished, its firing sound is nowhere near its final counterpart, it uses the battle rifle targeting reticle, it holds 36 rounds in a magazine just like the battle rifle, and it fires in a fully automatic setting. It's also grossly overpowered, being able to kill a player in only 6 headshots. Lastly, regarding the carbine, it's able to hold an obscene amount of ammo with a maximum of 324 spare rounds. Speaking of the battle rifle, it's up next. Most of you are probably already aware of what this does. It shoots in a 3-round burst when unzoomed, but when you zoom in, it switches to a single-shot firing mode, a feature the light rifle in Halo 4 inherited from this beta build. In terms of overall killing power, it's capable of killing an enemy player within 3 bursts when unzoomed and 8 semi-auto shots. The BR noticeably lacks an ammo counter underneath its scope, and there's quite a lot of screen shake when firing this weapon. A lot of these aspects of the BR were either removed or changed in the final game, where the standard BR lacks a single shot mode, the visible screen shake, and has access to an ammo counter. The plasma rifle is immensely overpowered in the beta, capable of killing an enemy with just 7 to 9 shots. It's even deadlier when dual wielding 2 of these, except the accuracy in the beta is a lot worse. The weapon sounds in the beta are weaker than the final build, and there's unpolished effects with overheating. The plasma pistols function the same for the most part, other than being able to drop an enemy in 4 shots after the shield breaks, but it too has unpolished effects, especially when using its overcharged shot. The main difference here is that it uses the plasma rifle firing sound when shooting the weapon. Both the plasma rifle and the plasma pistol have a visual glitch when it comes to dual wielding. When you overheat either of these weapons and pick up a dual wieldable weapon of any kind at the right time, the weapon's animation will glitch out and will be stuck in an overheated pose until you perform an action involving the weapon, such as firing it, meleeing, etc. The only real difference I was able to see with the SMG was that, when dual wielding 2 of them, the rate of fire is a lot faster than the final game, which made dual SMGs a lot deadlier in close range combat. Halo 2's Nilo is infamous for being one of the worst iterations of the weapon in the entire series, to the point that a certain song was created out of pity for it.
You are beautiful, no matter what they say. Those nerds won't bring us down.
However, in the Halo 2 beta, the Nilo is actually viable, shooting projectiles at a much greater speed than what we got in the final game. I'm not too sure why Bungie decided to nerf the Nilo this badly, because it didn't seem all that bad in practice when I was playing some rounds versus my cousin. Well, except when dual wielding 2 of these, then that was pretty busted. The brute shot wasn't that much different to the one that was seen in the final game, other than sounding slightly different from when firing it. But the main difference was its ammo capacity. It was able to hold a whopping 36 spare grenades in the beta with 40 in total, nearly 3 times as much ammunition compared to the released version. Also, its melee damage is noticeably weak, taking a total of 4 hits to kill an enemy. The rocket launcher has 2 notable differences compared to its final counterpart. The firing sound is noticeably wimpy in the beta, almost sounding more like a small gust of wind than an actual death machine. The tracking feature was still present, but it didn't function the same. You do not hold the trigger to lock onto a vehicle. Once your reticle is red, you're able to fire the rocket and it'll start homing in on the vehicle immediately. This will be changed to have the player hold the trigger for a target lock, and the game will give a visual indicator when the target is indeed locked. The Magnum is the exact same in terms of functionality as its pre-patched variant from the final game, killing in 9 shots when dual wielding. However, it has something funky going on with the ammo counter on the HUD. The sniper rifle is also nearly the same, except for the massive amounts of recoil that is generated when shooting the weapon. The beam rifle has similar amounts of recoil and performs the same as well, with the other difference being some tiny covenant glyphs appearing in the top left of the sight when zooming in. The reticle itself is also slightly different compared to the final version. The energy sword behaves almost like its final version, but has quite a few key differences. It doesn't have the ability to slash the enemy in a fast succession when up close, just like in the final game when you spam the right trigger. Also, the weapon sound when hitting either a player or any other surface in the game uses the normal melee sound instead of the unique energy sword sounds heard in the final game. When holding the sword as an elite, the elite's left hand does not appear at all when you switch to the sword, but it will show up when you're using the Spartan model. The elite's third-person animation for unsheathing the energy sword is a lot more plain in the beta, using one subtle animation, whereas the final game's elite model will have 3 different and more overzealous animations for taking the sword out. Lastly, the energy sword is always visually unsheathed unlike in the final game, which kinda looks ridiculous in third person.
Human.
What?
Why are you hurting yourself?
What are you talking about?
What do you mean, what am I talking about? You're slashing your own neck with that energy blade.
No, I'm not. I'm just taking the sword out over and over because it sounds cool as hell.
Human, your neck is gushing out blood.
Stop lying to me, you split. The beta's files included 2 cut weapons that would never make it to the final game, and both of them happen to be flamethrowers. They can only be added to the maps by modding. The human flamethrower has no animations and no damage model at all. This particular flamethrower model would make its debut in Halo 3 as a support weapon. The second cut weapon is the Covenant's version of the flamethrower. It has no textures, but at least has animations and a rather overpowered damage model, capable of dropping an enemy within less than a second. The projectile itself is rather misleading because it appears to be shooting straight forwards when seen in first person, and the damage model itself will also be straight. However, when viewed in third person, the projectile is shooting slightly downwards in comparison to wherever the holder of the weapon is aiming. In the HUD for this weapon, there's a heat gauge right next to the reticle that tells us this was meant to overheat after sustained fire, but it doesn't work. The battery life indicator at the top left is actually reused from the one seen in Halo 1's plasma weaponry. The model itself kind of looks like the ray gun from Call of Duty Zombie Mode. The human turret performs the same, but has a reticle that spins when firing it, which can be visually jarring to look at after a while. Meanwhile, the plasma turret is in an incomplete state. The model needs some polish in this stage of development. Movement is a bit janky, and the projectiles it fires are different from the ones seen from the final game. Moving on to the vehicles, the Warthogs are mostly the same, with the exception of the chain gun Warthog sharing the human turret spinning reticle feature. The Scorpion has quite a few differences. The vehicle is in a slightly greener tint, and the weaponry behaves differently as well. The Coaxial machine gun has a slower travel time, and the main cannon not only sounds a bit weaker, but also fires a lot faster than the final game. Also, when the Scorpion is destroyed, the main cannon doesn't get blown off the vehicle, but instead stays there for a few seconds before puffing into smoke. The reticle used for the Beta Scorpion is borrowed from the Halo 1 Scorpion, and the shots fired from the tank are slightly off-centered. The Ghost drives roughly the same, but it feels a bit faster, and the plasma cannons fire very differently, almost akin to its Halo 1 counterpart. The Banshee uses the exact same kind of weaponry as the Beta Ghost, and it too flies just the same as the one seen in the final game. However, the other different aspect of this Banshee is the secondary Banshee bomb that was made a campaign exclusive in the final release of Halo 2. It has a short travel distance until it finally drops completely to the ground. The Wraith is in a bit of an unpolished state, with the model taking cues from its Halo 1 counterpart due to what the mortar looks like. The mortar sounds are deeper than the ones heard in the final build, and the boosting effects are a work in progress. The Spectre is in the beta's files, but it can't be spawned in without modding. Luckily, GameCheat13 was capable of playing with it, so check out his video for other aspects of the Halo 2 beta, and check out his channel. He's a great guy and his content is awesome. The Spectre itself is also in an unpolished state. The vehicle sounds aren't present, the camera is stretched too far out, and the turret isn't able to rotate, staying in a fixed position at all times. There are also two cut vehicles that appear in the beta's files that don't make it to the final game. The more well known of the two is the Mongoose, which is relatively polished and works okay other than the wonky handling. It can't be hijacked and it's indestructible unlike all the other vehicles in the beta, and it's also extremely difficult to splatter an enemy player. Another cut vehicle is a prototype human flying vehicle resembling the Falcon, which appears in the beta's shared map. It has two passenger seats as well as a gunner position. It has no textures or sounds and was most likely cut very early on in development. In terms of power-ups, overshields and active camouflage do not show up at all in the beta, but it is possible to have your player model have overshielding due to the custom game options. However, unlike in Halo 1, there are no overshield effects on the character models, and they recharge extremely fast in the beta. A relic from Halo 1, however, makes it to the beta but not to the final game. The health pack makes a brief return and is fully functional. The health system in the Halo 2 beta is exactly like Halo 1's, where everyone not only has shields, but also health underneath it that does not regenerate. The health system would be revised in the final release of Halo 2 to have it so that the player's health auto-regenerates when they aren't taking any damage. The Halo 2 beta doesn't give the player a health bar in the HUD, so it's impossible to tell exactly how healthy the player is. Some of the maps have different spawn points for certain weapons. On Midship, the energy sword at top mid is replaced with a brute shot. The carbine in Car 2 is replaced with a beam rifle, and the plasma pistol in Pink 1 is replaced with a battle rifle. On Ivory Tower, the energy sword and rocket launcher ammo have swapped places, with the energy sword spawning in the courtyard, while the rocket launcher ammo sits behind the waterfall in what would become the sword spawn. The sniper rifle spawn point is also replaced with the beam rifle in the beta. The overshield spawn has a shotgun there instead. Funny enough, Reflection in Halo Reach, the remake of Ivory Tower, has a shotgun spawn in that exact spot. Finally, on Waterworks, the brute shot spawn is replaced with a beam rifle, while the energy sword spawn in the middle has a brute shot there instead. There's some other miscellaneous information that can be gathered from the Halo 2 beta. The dual wielding mechanics are slightly different. Normally, in the final version of the game, with dual wielding weapons that have reloadable magazines, you're only able to pick up the ammunition for the weapons if you already hold two of the same kind of weapon, such as two SMGs or two Needlers. However, in the beta, you can keep picking up the same weapon over and over regardless if it's the same as your dual weapons. You can keep doing this to see how much ammo, quote unquote, you can pick up at any given time. Some of the levels have unfinished visual aspects to them. For example, Zanzibar has corners that have lighting issues, while Waterworks uses a different skybox than the one seen in the final game. Also on Waterworks, the pieces of the stalactites, when blown up from far away, aren't rendered properly and become textureless. Finally, to be expected with any beta game, there's gameplay glitches. There will be very rare moments where if you happen to land on certain parts of map geometry, you'll fall right through and land out of bounds. Also, since I'm apparently the absolute worst at super bouncing, here's someone else's video that demonstrates the wonky physics of the Halo 2 beta way better than I ever could. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this little blast from the past segment that I made for you all today. If I happen to come across other Halo betas, I might make this a mini-series for the channel. If, and only if, you enjoy what you saw, hit that like button, and subscribe for more Halo content from this channel. For the rest of this video, I'm going to be playing some gameplay segments of the Halo 2 beta that I had with my cousin, since finding raw multiplayer footage of this game is a bit difficult. This is the Vengeful Vatum, and I'll see you on the great journey.
Lost the lead. Round Game over. Tied the leader.